I'll take that as a cue. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Welcome back for day 2 of the Building Brave Spaces Across Difference. So if that's what you're here for, you are in the right place. So welcome back. My name is Lauren Bard. I use the she, her pronouns, and I serve as a senior training manager here at Health Resources in Action, which is where the Community Health Training Institute sits. So before I turn it back over to the team, a quick word about the Community Health Training Institute. We are the team that brings you trainings throughout the year that are all absolutely free, and that is thanks to the generous funding of the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. So feel free to visit our website, hriainstitute.org, which you all know about it because you're here. But if you jump onto that website, you'll find upcoming trainings as well as a webinar library with all of our recorded trainings. So I'll pass it over to my colleague Tanayo to introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Apologies if there's background noise. They're doing construction a couple of houses down, but hello, I'm Tanayo, she, her pronouns. I'm a program associate with the Community Health Training Institute, and it's getting really loud, so I'm going to pass this on to Jasper, but really excited to be here today.
Yeah, hey again, folks. My name's Jasper. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. And I am a program associate with our Community Health Training Institute team, and I'm also one of your co-trainers and co-facilitators for today. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time sort of joining us for this training series. And I think Gracie, this is your shining moment to introduce yourself now.
Thanks, Jasper. Hey, all. Great to see you again for day 2. Again, I'm Gracie Rolfe. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a manager in the training and capacity building department at Health Resources in Action. Don't technically work on the Community Health Training Institute, but was lovingly poached by Jasper to help them create this training and facilitate this training. And really happy to be back for day 2. I know we're beginning to do a lot of reflection in day 1, and now we're going to think about some more reflection and how we can sort of show up in the best way to support our colleagues across differences. So really looking forward to day 2. And I think I'm going to hand it back to Jasper, who's going to take us through the rest of our welcome and intros.
Yes, so I won't spend too much time on these next couple slides, but they're just another Zoom refresher because we don't like to assume that folks know how to use Zoom. We try to keep it a little bit more accessible. So on the bottom of your screen, there should be a toolbar of which you can use the mute and stop video buttons on the far left to, if you want to come off mute or turn on or turn off your video feed so we can see your face. There's also on that bottom toolbar a chat feature, which you can click and that will take you to a chat box, which we'll be using periodically through the training. There's also, if you go to the top of your Zoom screen, there's a little view options tab. And if you click that, the third option down is annotate. And I see some folks are already annotating our screen with some smiley faces. We used that a little bit yesterday, and it's kind of, it just gives you the chance to kind of type on the screen and add stamps and draw and whatnot. So we might use that a little bit today. And then the last most important thing is if you want to kind of switch up the view on your screen is in the upper right-hand corner, there's a speaker view button. And you can click that to kind of toggle the different ways that you kind of see our little squares of faces and the screen and the slides and things like that. So I think that's that for Zoom. Hopefully folks are fairly familiar with the platform. We can go to the next couple of slides, which I think kind of just walk us through breakout rooms. And so we used them a bunch yesterday, or we're going to use them a bunch today. It's pretty self-explanatory, I think, but we will kind of evict you all into some smaller groups virtually. And you should have all of the same controls in those breakout spaces as you do in the main space. If you want to leave that breakout room early, you can just click the leave breakout room button that will be kind of in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Just make sure you don't leave the meeting as a whole. You only leave your breakout room. And you'll be given a quick countdown too before we kind of whisk you all back to the main space. And then I think the next slide is just for any folks who are having audio troubles. You can also connect your cell phone or phone to your Zoom audio to kind of serve as your audio if for some reason your Wi-Fi is being bad. And to do that, you can just kind of click the little caret next to your mute button. And then there's a little button that says switch to phone audio. And then it will ask you to kind of enter your participant PIN, just so that this way Zoom knows that your audio and your actual Zoom profile square are linked up and you're not getting like disparate sounds. So I'll pause here if there are any immediate questions about Zoom. And if you run into any tech issues, you're more than welcome to reach out to any member of our team and we'll do our best to kind of help support that. Any initial questions around Zoom? Hopefully folks are experts at this point. Okay, onwards, Gracie. And so this was just again our welcome. We want to try to bring folks into the space. Hopefully you all got to meet each other a little bit more yesterday, but if you would like in the chat, you're more than welcome to put your name, pronouns if you want, the organization you're coming from. And then yesterday we asked you to share a fun fact with us, but I think I'm going to go off script a little bit because we already used that. So why don't folks share their favorite memory from when they were a child? Just like when you think back to being a kid, what was like your favorite memory? I know for me, I was like a big Elmo fan. Like Elmo and I were like ride or die. But just feel free to put that in the chat if you would like. No pressure to, since I know we did a lot of intros yesterday, but always fun to kind of break the ice and try to bring folks into this space. We have in the chat Rex from the Newport Health Equity Zone in Rhode Island, really loved playing in the woods. Alex from Duxbury for All says naps on the beach. True story, Alex. When I was a child, it was my first time visiting the beach. I thought the beach was made of sugar and not sand. So I had a big mouthful of sand. My parents were very stressed. Michelle from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health says she used to fly down the stairs at the house and their dad would catch them at the bottom and then they would go as far down the hall as they could and leap to the bottom. Heather says vacationing to Eastport, Maine for the 4th of July. Chinayo says, I have fond memories of playing make-believe in my backyard and on the playground with my little friends. You know, wild imagination. Dora mentions being born and growing up in Colombia. So favorite memories, eating fresh mangoes from your grandparents' farm. I'm very jealous. Let's see, Gracie says vacationing on the Cape. Sheila says, my father would snowblow a skating rink in our front yard each winter. Y'all have some really magical childhoods. Leslie says, ironically, when I had surgery at 4, when you got to receive one-on-one attention for a few days. Oh, well, I'm glad that hopefully, Leslie, you're being able to sort of bask in the limelight later in life. Amanda says breeding. Kathy says camping and swimming. Susan says trips to Grammy's house. Oh, I love it. So hold on to that childhood joy and curiosity as we move forward through the rest of our slides and hopefully our strategies for today. Gracie, if we can go to the next slide. I just wanted to revisit the group agreements that we all kind of talked about yesterday. And just wanted to poll folks and see, what do you all think we did really well yesterday? And what do you think we could maybe improve on for today as we build this container? So we have, you know, if possible, leave your camera on, mute yourself if you're not speaking, take space, make space, respect others and yourself, take care of yourself, and stories stay, lessons leave. I've been doing a lot of talking, so I'm going to pause here and kind of welcome this for any reflection from you all in terms of what you're thinking and feeling. What do you all think we did well, and what are maybe some opportunities for a little bit of growth for us as a group? And I recognize your names and faces, so I know a lot of you were here yesterday.
I think you guys are fantastic. Seriously. I mean, I've attended other trainings with you before, and I'm just impressed with the way that you run it, the content, the professionalism. Everything's awesome. So there's not one thing that I would do differently or that you guys should do differently.
Well, I'm very flattered. Thank you, Dora.
This is actually my first training that I've attended with you all, and I felt that I was challenged to think about things in new ways yesterday, which is what I hope when I do a training. You know, you don't want to show up and be an expert of what you're learning. So I thought that was great, and I really thought that the breakout rooms and the people that we shared thoughts with, I think that they definitely had a free flow of ideas and felt safe and encouraging. So I think you're doing a great job also.
Oh, well, thanks, Alex. This is all really helpful feedback for us, because sometimes I think over the virtual platform, it's really difficult for us to tell where our audience is coming from. So I'm taking this all as very encouraging and good signs. I'll definitely echo that back. I think a training is really dependent on who we have as participants. So you all have been a very great group. And so I think what I'll do is, if these group agreements still feel like they resonate, if we think we're doing a really good job with them, I'm happy to kind of take us to showing you all what we have planned for today. So right now we're kind of wrapping up this welcome and reintroductions piece. Then we're going to do a quick reflection about sort of unpacking our biases. And then Gracie's going to take us through this tool we wanted to introduce you all to, called the Ladder of Inference. Then we're going to do an activity to sort of challenge those biases and use the ladder. I'm going to take a quick break. And then we have this office space activity planned for you all, which I'll leave you waiting in suspense. And then we'll sort of close out with some additional tools and resources. And this is all to kind of feed into our learning objectives for you all. So these are the same as yesterday, but we really hope that you all will learn tools to help examine some unconscious biases or assumptions, and how to address those assumptions moving forward, to understand how to advocate for BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, people of color, and the LGBTQ+ communities without speaking for them. And then I love this last one, right, which is to delve into heart space work to find your way to genuine allyship. And I think that's something that Gracie and I really took to heart as we were trying to build this training and really build in that space. And so, any questions on the agenda and learning objectives before we kind of jump headlong back into our content? Alrighty. Next slide, Gracie, please. Oops, just kidding. Stop sharing slides. So what I'll do then is, before we jump into this kind of Ladder of Inference thing, I just kind of wanted to recap some of our day one things, and I'll bring back actually this Padlet that we used towards the end of yesterday, just for folks to kind of, jot down their thoughts, what they wanted to bring into day two. Actually, Gracie, I'm wondering if you could just share the screen and show the Padlet to folks, but the link was put in the chat. And just wanted to go over some of the things folks had mentioned, questions, and use that to kind of funnel our way into the space today. And so, as Gracie pulled that up, I think a lot of the themes that I was kind of seeing reading across this were really around, the messiness of trying to challenge or break down some of these barriers, or this social conditioning, or these binaries, right? And kind of what exists for us on the other side, kind of once we do that, right? So folks wrote, having intentional conversations and still figuring out the best way to show up in this space and learn, I really love what someone put here, this Audre Lorde quote about the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, right? So thinking about how it is that we are equipping ourselves with these tools and this radical compassion to really be able to reach one another and see what that looks like. Once again, because I've been doing a lot of talking, I'm going to pause. If anyone wants to add to kind of what they're thinking about entering today, you know, this training with, what are you bringing with you? What thoughts, questions do you have? Gracie, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add. So, but I'm going to put myself on mute. So.
I think just to echo what Jasper said, something that's resonating with me is maybe it can feel like a bit daunting to try to like break down these really like oppressive structures and ways of being and ways of thinking. And, you know, I think a quote that I really like resonate with and often come back to, I heard Angela Davis speak. This was right after George Floyd had been murdered in 2020. And she said, you know, the world in 2020 was probably really unimaginable for people who lived in 1920, you know, like in terms of the progress that we made, advancements in many different aspects of society. And to that point, I think the world in 21-22 is going to look really different from how it is in 2022 today, right? And just because we may not see like massive strides or massive changes in our lifetime should not prevent us from like still doing this really important work, right? Because every person plays a really important part in this work. So even if we're not seeing like complete 180s or this binary system or way of thinking burn to the ground by the time I'm dead, hopefully like my children or their children's children will see that come to fruition. But I feel like we shouldn't get bogged down and stuck, you know, feeling like we're not making a massive change, because I think we are. Alex, go for it.
A question in that. So this is based on personal experience, but I have definitely struggled in the past few weeks with feeling like we're going backward. Like I really recognize that I had an assumption that when we made forward progress, we would be progressing from there. And I think I had this beautiful linear path maybe, and I knew it would be hard and it would be slow, but going backwards maybe wasn't in my, just didn't think that was a reality. And so I definitely have felt moments where I've just been like, you know, like this deflated balloon, like, what? So I guess, could you speak to like just how you, maybe strategies for managing that would be awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I might kick that back to the group first. What do folks think? Feeling like really bogged down, like what we're witnessing in this world is not normal on many levels, and how do we not get stuck in feeling down and feeling like deflated, like Alex was speaking to? Folks have thoughts on that?
Well, I think I can speak from the personal, and maybe this will jog other folks' thoughts. One of my favorite quotes, as approved also by my therapist, is, you know, progress is not linear, right? And so I think I really take that to heart in thinking about like, what are the different ways that this path we're on, this path towards justice, might change and envelop and unloop, right? As we take into consideration, I think all of these like big meta level thoughts of like, of course the system is going to push back as we push back against it, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think the thing I find really grounding for me is I feel like I'm at the point just in my own personal life where things are really stable and predictable, and I'm able to really revel in, I think, a lot of these like little moments of joy and like the life details, and you know what I mean? Because the whole point of, I think, moving towards justice is to be able to live our lives, right? And so I was even remarking to our CHTI team, I'm in like this battle with my dog where I'll give him right now, where I will give him a bath and he will smell all beautiful and clean, and he hates that. So he'll go and he'll roll in like all the deer shit in the backyard. And then I have to give him another bath, and then he smells clean, and then he goes back to roll in the deer shit. So like the past day or two, as we've been doing this training, I've been having to like stop and do like emergency dads to like let him back in the house. And I take that as like a loving piece of, this is part of my journey towards justice, right? Because this is part of my life, and the different little things that I think are really important to kind of celebrate, because no matter what oppressive structure there be, my dog is going to roll in shit. So, you know, that is a loving constant that I have in my life. Curious to hear, like Gracie said, from others in the room, what kind of things you do or you think about to kind of give you that sort of strength or joy.
Jasper, I just want to say thank you for that. And I think sometimes levity is also helpful. So now when I feel like things are backsliding, I'm just going to imagine some senators rolling in deer shit, and I will think of you. Thank you.
I think we have to, like, you know, take in the small moments that bring us joy, because if we don't, then like those bad people, like they've won, right? Like I was watching some kids play like pee-wee soccer the other day, and I was like, this is so cute. And one of them scored a goal. And I was like, and I was clapping for them. And I had this like feeling like I shouldn't be happy because like 19 kids are dead and a teacher's dead, right? But then I'm like, well, they've won. Like if they steal that joy from me, right? So like any moment of levity that you can revel in, that the repetitiveness of Jasper cleaning their dog after he's rolled in dog shit, like anything that you can get some joy from, some levity from. And I really like Jasper's point of like, nothing's really linear in this life. Like change is not linear, progress is not linear. So
And Tanaya is getting very meta in the chat, but it's very true. Linear time is a Western concept, right? So what are the different ways that time is alive in other spaces, and what does that look like? And I guess transition us maybe into some of the bulk of the content, the why you are here and the why they pay Gracie and I the livable wage bucks. You know, let's learn some tools, right? Let's, you know, I think the fact that we're all kind of in this space, I think is a really, really motivating and great sign that we're kind of on the right track. So Godspeed to you, Gracie, and explaining the Ladder of Inference.
thanks so much, Jasper, and thanks everyone for, you know, taking some time to reflect on that. There's a lot going on in the world right now, but I think any moment of joy and levity that we can find, and yeah, realizing that this is a lifelong journey of work, and we may not see like the fruits of our labor like come to fruition by the time we're dead, but that shouldn't stop us from trying to make this a more just and equitable world. But let's like dive back into this content. So I know we talked a lot about like, you know, history. We talked about the way that we've sort of really gendered things. I think we had a really great discussion about like the earplugs, the gender reveals, all the way up to the bathrooms, and hopefully we're like beginning to connect the threads between those things, which are like really silly in and of themselves. And now what can we do like to really sort of challenge some of the assumptions or beliefs that we have, right? Because like little baby Gracie is not born with bias or stigma or assumptions about people, about groups of people, about neighborhoods, about whatever. Like, and I think you all really beautifully alluded to this yesterday, we're socialized, right? We take in messages, we take in learnings, we take in trainings, the news we watch, where we grow up, the people we go to school with, who raises us. Like this all has influence in us sort of determining or adding meaning to things. And that's how like our beliefs and our assumptions come to be. And so we want to share with you one tool, which is the Ladder of Inference, which we think is a really helpful way to sort of unpack or discover where some of these assumptions and biases and beliefs may come from. So before I jump into it, maybe folks can give me like a raise of hands or a thumbs up. How many of you have seen the Ladder of Inference tool before, are familiar with it? Give me a brief raise of hands. Alex, it just may be you. So, and Dora. So Alex and Dora, feel free. You can give like a very brief overview. How would you like define or explain what the Ladder of Inference is to someone who maybe does not know what it is? And that's okay if you're like, Gracie, you're doing that. I don't have to do that. But any thoughts that you want to share with the group before we kind of dive in?
For me, the way that I learned it, and it was really interesting the way that this presenter sort of presented it, was the fact that you're going to make certain assumptions about everything, you know what I mean? And as you go up the ladder, you're going to learn sort of more information, right? But you've already had those sort of like assumptions based on whatever you've learned, based on whatever you've been exposed to, or what your family believes, or whatever has influenced you in the past. And the way that she said it is, as you learn the truth and as you learn more information, you're going to go down and you're literally going to hit your chin on the rungs of the ladder. And you're going to realize that like your perception of whatever this is has not been true, and you haven't had all the information. So you have to be really careful about making those assumptions without really knowing or really understanding, or you're going to get hurt and your chin is going to hurt a lot. So
love that.
I'm sure you will do a much better way, or much better job of explaining.
Oh, I thought that was excellent. Thank you, Dora. Alex, go ahead.
So I'm an executive coach, and I work with leaders on behavior all the time. And I also study neuroscience, so it's going to kind of come from that perspective. But I use this tool a lot for unpacking what our brains do before we even are aware of it, with every experience that we have. And it's not good or bad. It's how our brains work. So we have an experience. Our brain selects some data from that experience, makes up some meaning for it, and then a judgment. So we feel like we know what to do with the action. If we come again, the piece that we always use in coaching is your meaning is going to come from your previous experiences.
Right.
So one, thinking that everybody shares that meaning since they haven't had your experience, that is a danger spot. And thinking that your interpretation for other people, since you haven't had their experience, is another danger spot. And so we always verify conclusions and check them out. But that's sort of how we use it in coaching.
Jasper, I think me and you can like leave and like go get a coffee or something. Like, wow, like
actually, can I add one more interesting thing from a neuroscience perspective? So what's really interesting and that I've been learning recently is that data piece. We actually have the meaning making part is actually happening before we even interact with the data. So we can actually often see, hear, experience like everything that we think is a movie of what's happening, something that's actually being built on our meaning making before it even happens. Like if you've ever had that thing of like, wait a minute, what did I just read? I thought I just read something, because we're actually, we're maybe even be a little bit meaning making before we think we see the facts. So maybe even the facts aren't even all shared. So I thought that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, love that. Thank you so much, Alex and Dora. I think really, really great insights and great thoughts. And if anyone who is listening is like, Gracie, I still don't know what the fuck this means, I'm going to explain it in a very basic layman's terms. Okay. So picture a ladder, right? Before we even get on to the ladder, before we even hit a rung of the ladder, we are constantly surrounded by data in our lives. And I'm not talking about like reading public health graphs or like looking at rates of gun violence. Yes, that is data, but data is also what I'm seeing. Right? It's like the people that I'm passing by when I walk my dog in the morning, the cars that I see on my street, the interactions that people are having. what I can see, what I can smell, what I see people doing. I'm taking all that data in all the time. And we are taking in, even right now, you're taking in data. Even right now, your ladders are going, whether you realize it or not, but we'll get to like what that looks like in just a little bit. So I think of data as like everything that you can see, what people are saying, what people are doing. I'm not saying your data is right or wrong. I'm just saying that it is, right? It just exists, right? And the data where I am in Portland, Maine on this day, on Thursday, you know, May 26th might look really different from where Jasper is in New Jersey, what they're seeing, what they're observing people doing. And again, I'm not saying anyone's data is right or wrong. It just is. It just exists, right? And from all the data that we are, you know, going through and taking in every day, which is a lot of data, we choose to select certain bits of data. So even from everything that's happening in our worlds, we select bits of data, right? So, and from when we select data, we then choose to add meaning to data. And I'm not saying, again, that what meaning you're adding is right or wrong, but a lot of us add things or assume things that may actually not be there. Like we're adding information that may not be there. And then what do we do when we add meaning? We draw conclusions about things. And then to sort of take it to the arrow that's on the left-hand side of this ladder, when we draw a conclusion about something or someone or some place or whatever, maybe this leads us to take action, okay? So I'm gonna give like a really sort of silly example, but I think it's something that has probably happened to everyone in this room if you've ever driven a car before. So imagine like it's Friday, the sun is shining, like, you know, our office closed at 1 p.m. They're like, enjoy the long weekend. I'm meeting Jasper for dinner. Like, I'm feeling happy. That's all the data around me, right? Like, I'm driving in my car. Like, my favorite music is playing. We're going to have dinner. Like, we're going to sit outside. It's going to be so great. You know, I turn into the parking lot. I put my blinker on to turn into a spot. And someone drives in front of me, cuts me off, and takes my parking spot. Does that ever happen to someone? Yeah, it's happened to you. So, okay, from all the data that was around me, right? Like what I was observing, what I was seeing, what I was doing, I'm just selecting that one piece of data, right? Of this person driving in front of me, cutting me off, taking my spot, okay? So I've selected that data from everything that was around me. What meaning do I add to the data? This guy's an asshole, right? Like, who does he think he is, right? Like he's entitled. He's like the men's recycling trash can that Tanaya was joking about yesterday, right? Like this guy's an ass. My conclusion is like, well, he's entitled. His parents didn't raise him well. You know, he's probably like a dick to his girlfriend. And then what action do I take? I drive up behind his car. I roll down my window, I flip him the bird, I lay on my horn, and then I drive off, right? And that all happens in what? The span of like less than 10 seconds. So I've done all that in less than 10 seconds. Now imagine, right? I've like laid on my horn, I've flipped this guy the bird. Imagine this guy gets out of his car and he says, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but my wife is actually in the restaurant, in this building, in this restaurant, and she just went into labor and she's expecting a child, right? And she called me and she's like, I need help getting to the hospital. Now I feel like an ass, right? Because there were two things happening at the same time and I was only seeing one of them, right? I was adding meaning to something that actually wasn't true, right? This guy actually seemed really nice and he seemed really apologetic, and I was adding meaning. He's entitled. He's an ass to his girlfriend. He's like, he's probably cut people off before. He deserves to get the, you know, the bird flipped to him and me laying on my horn. He deserves all that. But when in reality, something else was happening that I wasn't seeing, right? And I think that's like a really simple example of the ladder of inference, but how quickly, I mean, I went up my ladder in like 0.2 seconds making an assumption about this person, right? About this guy. I added meaning, I drew a conclusion, and I took action. And I did that all in a really short span of time. So you can imagine how we do this when we see people walking down the street. You know, if any of us who are, you know, working in a school or trying to, you know, I'm thinking of like my mom who's like trying to get with it with trans people and pronouns, like what she must feel when she sees a gender neutral bathroom in a building. Like what assumption is she making? What's her ladder saying? If you see, you know, a pride parade in your town, like what assumptions, what feelings does that bring up? If you see two queer people holding hands walking down the street, like what does that bring up for you? Our ladders are firing all the time, my friends. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's really easy to go up the ladder. It's much harder to like short circuit the ladder and then walk back down and think, well, where is this coming from? Like, where is this assumption coming from? So that was a lot. I'll just pause, see if Jasper, you want to add anything, and then if there are any questions or thoughts or things coming up for folks. Alrighty. Is there like a brave and lovely soul who maybe wants to walk us through, you know, a brief example of maybe an assumption that you've had or that you've made, how you walked up your ladder, and then conversely, how you tried to walk back down your ladder? Is there any brave soul like have a thought that they want to share about something like that? It doesn't have to be related to anything that we're talking about today. Yeah,
All
Heather,
right,
go for
just
it,
'cause
please.
feel quiet. So a few years back, you know, when I knew even less than I know now, I worked at in a mental health clinic, and there was a client there that I was just triaging at the time. I'm not a clinician, but I knew his name. You know, came up that he was here and I needed to triage him. And, you know, I met with him and I know that he had said that he was, you know, starting a transition. And then a few months had gone by and I hadn't seen him, and I got another message a few months later and it had his name. And I went out to the waiting room and there was, you know, maybe 5 or 6 people out there. And I'm like, well, where, you know, I went back to the front desk and I said, well, he's not here. Did he leave? And they're like, no, he's right there. And like, it didn't dawn on me, like he looks different. Like he doesn't look, it's not the same person I met 3 months ago. But it was like my assumption of like, just, well, where is he? You know, and then realizing like, oh my gosh, like I can't assume that anymore. I can't assume those things that you just always just assume. But it was kind of an eye-opening experience where I was like, okay, so that's something I've just been conditioned to, you know, where's that familiarity? And you don't necessarily, that's not necessarily how things go.
Thanks, Heather. I think you're right on, right? Like you really can't assume anything about anyone, no matter how right on you think you are. You can't really assume, you can never assume someone's gender. You also probably can't ever assume someone's race or how someone's racialized. And that's why we ask, right? Like that's why we ask questions and we don't assume. And I think that's actually a really beautiful segue into our next activity that we're going to do around, you know, looking at, we're going to do the stock image activity, but we're going to look at some stock images, and you're going to have to, in your group, like write down what your assumptions are. Like you can write down what you think you're seeing, but there may actually be something completely else going on in the photo that we're not seeing, right? You may be seeing a man and a woman, but it actually might be 2 trans people or 2 non-binary people. You might think you're looking at a Black person. It might be you know, someone from the Caribbean who's not Black. Like that's the point that we're trying to get to, right? You can't assume anything about anyone. So I think I'm going to stop sharing this screen for just a minute, and I'm going to pull up the stock image photos. Actually, let's just run through the directions first, and maybe Jasper or Tanayo will put these in the chat. And then we'll look at some of the images together before we send you off into breakout rooms. And Tanayo just dropped a link in the chat, which is a separate PowerPoint that has several images of stock image photos that we're going to be using. But these are the directions, so I'm going to run over these first. So we're going to be in breakout rooms of like 3 to 4 people, maybe even less, depending on, you know, the size of this group. Tanayo has dropped the link of the PowerPoint that you can access, and it should have a series of images, but let us know if you're having any trouble opening that or accessing that. And as a group, we want you to name some of the assumptions that you're having in response to looking at these images. And below are some questions that you might consider. And I think Jasper has dropped these in the chat. Thanks so much, Jasper. So how would you describe the image, right? Like not even trying to like necessarily walk down our ladders, but just like your gut reaction, like how are you describing this image? Then think about, okay, what are some of the assumptions that I made after I just described that image? Maybe I assumed people's race, maybe I assumed people's gender, maybe I assumed the sort of like relationships that seem present in some of those photos. What information did you add that may not necessarily be true, right? Like my information about the guy cutting me off is like, this guy's a dick, when in reality, he's trying to get to his pregnant wife to the hospital. And now I feel like a dick. And then describe how you walked up your ladder. So like describe the process of what data you selected, how you added meaning to that data, what conclusions you drew. And then hopefully, and what we're trying to get you to do is how did you walk back down the ladder? Like, how did you really unpack, well, where are these assumptions coming from? Why did I add meaning to this piece of data? Have a conversation about that. All right, my friends. I'm just going to stop sharing. I'm going to pull up the stock image photos very quickly. There is alt text on these stock image photos for to make them accessible to folks as well. I'm not going to go through these in huge detail. And let me see if I can just get these in from beginning. And you're going to look at all of these images together in your groups. All right. So this nice image, like what maybe we assume is like a heterosexual relationship with a child, maybe. Friends, I don't know, girlfriends, partners, I don't know. Hiring managers, what's going on here? I don't know. That's up to you. Friends, dads, parents, partner, I don't know, right? What's this group? Who do we assume is like being friends, maybe being dating in this photo? Not sure. Okay, so like very, very generic, very simple stock images. Again, you're gonna have, I think we're gonna be in these breakout rooms maybe for about like 15 to 20 minutes. I think, does that sound right, Jasper? Where did Jasper go? There they are. Yeah, I think we'll do maybe like 15 to 20 minutes. Again, the link with the stock images is in the chat. The directions in terms of the questions that we want you to think about and try to answer in your group are in the chat as well. Jasper has dropped some stuff in, Tanayo has dropped some stuff into the chat. Folks can feel free to ask for help if they're having any trouble, but I'll let whoever is being the tech wizard send you off into breakout rooms. So have fun, y'all. And the recording has resumed. That's all we ever need. All right, y'all. Welcome back. I don't think we lost anyone in cyberspace, but hopefully, you know, that was pretty ample time in the breakout, but would love to hear from a few different rooms. You can feel free to sort of answer these questions. So what was that like for you to go through that exercise? How did it feel? What did you notice about your ladders and the ladders of your group members? And ultimately, what assumptions were made? The floor is yours. Any brave souls want to start?
I'll start and just say, because I had already seen the pictures and because of where we are, the introduction, I was second guessing myself and sort of leaping over in some way. What was my first reaction? Do I even know what my first reaction was? What, you know, was it the stereotype? It was it, you know, did I fall for something stock? Like, why would someone choose this stock image and what would they use it for? You know, so I was kind of rotating through a whole process that was a little bit extra self-conscious. So I'll just put that on the table.
I appreciate you, Jean. You're like cheating the activity. No, I'm kidding. But like, I feel like that's what I want you all to do in real life. I want you to be like, oh, I can't make this assumption about this person, or why did I add meaning to this piece of data? I feel like, you know, I want us to get there. So I really appreciate you naming that, Jean. Thank you. Other thoughts from other folks?
My group realized that we would talk about different scenarios and kind of settle on one that we thought we agreed on. And we realized that we were always looking for a good story. And like the one or two times that it kind of took a turn where it might not be so positive, we were like, oh no, but it can't be that because, and we decided that that was just part of the attitudes of who we are, bringing that in.
Right, Michelle. Our experiences that lead us to believe like, oh, it must be this way instead of this way, or I'm adding this information because this is what I was taught. Like, we really can't help it, right? Like you're doing that in less than a second, or less than half a second at that. So, Leslie, go for it. I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I found it interesting how we all filtered our views through our own experiences.
Right.
We were trying to, I was in the room with Jean. We were trying to figure out, wow, if we could see the other person's face, if we could turn it around and see the other person's face, so we could come to a better conclusion of what we thought we saw, you know, gathering a little bit more evidence.
Yeah, that's interesting, Cindy Lou, because we often don't have like all the information that we would want or that we would need. And that's when we add information, right? That may not actually be there, right? That we're assuming. And I'm not saying we're bad people for assuming, but like we really need to challenge, why am I adding this information in this way? So I appreciate you naming that. Thanks, Cindy Lou. What else came up for folks?
In my group, I think we did a pretty good job of like consciously walking up the ladder and being like, this might be the relationship, this might be their gender, but who knows? And then kind of walking back and down and saying, okay, this is the stuff that seemed like an objective observation. And this is the stuff that we were telling stories about to ourselves. But I definitely noticed that I was adding my own experience onto things, like the picture of the person, the two people who were like holding hands, which kind of looked like a job interview. I was like, that person on the right seemed like they're holding the hand of that person on the left like a little too much. Like I don't really like that. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm adding my domestic sexual violence field experience onto that, and they're probably fine, but I'm gonna keep an eye out for them anyway.
Love that, Amanda, right? Like you're adding your own experiences, like what you have seen in your field, what you've seen in your work. And again, I'm not like blaming anyone for doing that. Like, I'm not blaming you for assuming that like, oh, if you see someone who has facial hair, you think they must be a man. Like, I'm not blaming you for thinking that. I'm trying to get you to challenge like, well, maybe that person isn't a man, or maybe that person doesn't identify as a man. Like, and bringing it back to what we talked about yesterday, right? We assume and we divide things based on gender and based on sex, and we assume like men have to look this way, they have to act this way, they need to behave in this way, and women do this, this, and this, like polar opposites. But I'm trying to challenge us to think like, who's saying that, right? Like who's saying that that has to be how it is? Because again, like all this stuff is made up if that was not hammered home enough yesterday. So thank you. Thanks, Amanda, for naming that. Other thoughts that folks want to share?
I'd like to share, and Alex, you can help out because you had a great comment. Between slide number 1 and the mom and dad and child, and the next one with the 2 women, with one mom and dad, we already identified that this was a relationship. With slide number 2, at least I did. I just never identified the relationship. There's just that 2 people were happy together. And so it didn't matter any of the relationship status. And so I thought that was interesting. Alex, do you want to comment any more on it? Because you made a great point.
I think what we were just reflecting on is like with different images, there was almost like more of a need to make meaning out of things on different levels. So we all went to, oh, mom, dad, kid, first one. And then the first one was like, oh, two people just had a great joke. And it was sort of like just the emotion or the thing. And there, none of us, all three of us didn't put like effort into like, who are they? What's their relationship? And so it's just interesting to see how different scenarios even create a stronger need for us to make more meaning and figure things out. Like where does that even come from? Like, sometimes you could walk by a flower and be like, hey, cool flower, versus why did that flower get here? Like, who planted that flower, right? So it's just interesting how different things just even, we have to add more meaning to some things for something. I don't know where it comes from, but really interesting just because all three of us had the same first impulse.
Yeah, right on. And I see Jasper put in the chat, we can't even assume that those people identified as men or women, or that those people were parents. Those three people could have been like siblings, right? Like we actually don't know. And that's us information adding.
So I'll just share one more thing, which is really interesting. Sometimes I noticed that we override our own experience. So I have a very diverse family, and that could be my family. I have 30-year gaps between me and some of my siblings, and you could find this in my house. It never, like, I didn't even have that in sort of my automatic draw, like they could be siblings, right? And that, right. So I thought that was hysterical. Like, based on your own experience, Alex, that could be siblings, right? So nope, wasn't even available.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex. I see Leslie put in the chat, I'm reminded of how thankful I am for my education, where I learned to think objectively instead of subjectively, which leads to using the ladder in social situations. It's so important for overcoming borderline personality tendencies. Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I would kind of argue to an extent, like everything's kind of subjective. Like, nothing's really objective in this world. And I think the Ladder of Inference really proves that to us. Like, we may think we've got all the information, like we've got all the evidence that we need in this photo, but like still we don't until we ask people. Like, that's the point that is really trying to get hammered home. We can't assume anything until we ask people, like, what's your name? Like, how should I refer to you? Can you tell me what your pronouns are? Like I think that's a way that we can also begin to really think and challenge some of those deeply held narratives and beliefs and assumptions. Because I think, oh, if I see someone who's got a flat chest, they've got a deep voice, they've got an Adam's apple, they've got facial hair, they must be a man, right? And I'm saying, yeah, and maybe they're not a man. Like, just ask, right? Just like we need to get comfortable, like really getting rid of the assumptions that we have about people in our society. Awesome. Any other thoughts that folks want to share from these breakouts, or things that kind of became illuminated for you?
I think that it was definitely an interesting exercise because I do try really hard in general to not make assumptions about people. So I'm pretty comfortable saying, okay, like this person on the left who has lighter skin and darker hair and blah, 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 using those kinds of terms. But I still have that cultural conditioning like ready to go. Like I can be like, okay, that's a family and that's a woman and that's a man. And like as much as you're trying to unlearn it, like it's always waiting for you if you want to make those assumptions.
Right. Thanks, Amanda, for naming that. Jasper, anything you want to add thinking about this activity?
Yeah, I think I would just say, I encourage you all to think of this activity and this, sort of challenging your assumptions and, whatever framework, whatever tools you kind of want to use. It's really a muscle, right? And it's a muscle that I even think about when, for myself, like as a non-binary trans person, like when I'm in community with other folks who identify that way, or just like, the trans community, it's really funny because I notice myself, I think, being so much more in practice of that. But like, even speaking for myself personally, right, most of the people, my coworkers, my friends, my family are not trans or non-binary. And so I even see how sometimes in my own head, it's wild, I'll like misgender myself because of the ways that this is so deeply programmed. And I'm like, oh shit, that's like really embarrassing. Like for me, you know, I know who I am, right? But it's such a muscle that you really, really need to practice, right? And it's something that as you get better with it and you, I think, challenge other people around yourself to do better, you all will have a much easier time, I think, kind of leaning into that and really checking those, right? Because I mean, yes, I think there's a lot of emphasis on like ways of thinking that like we've been pressured to do, but we've been pressured to do that. We can unlearn them, right? We can definitely unlearn them. Like that is a very doable, feasible thing. And if it's, you know, you have to look in the mirror or look at the photo of a person who you know who's maybe transitioning or goes by a different name, and you just stare at that photo and you just need to re-say their name and pronouns over and over again, you know, like in your bathroom or whatever it is until you get it. That's something that you know, that's just a muscle that you have to do, right? And so I just encourage you all to really lean into that because it's really true. And I think it's one of those, you know, sort of like bittersweet things where, you know, when I mentioned that, like, damn, yeah, like mom and dad, you know, y'all are still getting it wrong and it's like fucking me up in my own brain. I think they start to get it a little bit more, right? Because we're all in community, we're all in relationship with each other. And, you know, whether or not you practice those muscles really will have an impact on the people around you. So that's my soapbox. Those are my 2 cents.
Appreciate you, Jasper. Thanks so much for sharing that. So I know that we've all been working hard. Our little ladders are like about to implode. And I think it's time for a break. So it's 11:19 right now. We're gonna take a break until 11:30. So that's just over 10 minutes. Tonight was putting up a timer on screen. Tonight may play some music at the same time. And we'll see you all back here at, let's call it 11:30. So thanks, everybody.
Cool. Alrighty, so I will kick us back off into our content. So just to kind of shift gears, recap. So over the course of yesterday, today so far, what we've done is we've covered some history. We've kind of tried to give you a couple different tools to check those assumptions and bias. Gracie just led us through this Ladder of Inference activity. I want you to all kind of put that to the side for now. So, you know, kind of pretend that, you know, none of this has happened so far yet. And we're going to do a totally different activity that might seem weird, but just follow me with it, humor me. I promise it will kind of get us to the finish line. So this next activity, we're going to send you back into breakouts. And I want you to design with the people in your group, your dream office. So you'll be with like 3 to 4 other folks, and you have to make a mood board of your dream office and workplace. And what we'll do is we'll put a link in the chat to the slides, and each group will have a blank slide. And I want you to essentially go to Google Images and just copy paste whatever you want to see in this office onto your slide. Right. And so you'll have 15 minutes to do that. And you have an unlimited budget. So you want like 8 weeks vacation time, you can put that in there. Right. I really want you all to lean into kind of the creativity and the fun of just design your dream office space. Like, what do you want to see? Right. And so if you go to the next slide, I'll just give you kind of like an example, maybe to work from. I did this in 5 minutes, so yours should probably look much nicer. But Gracie and I would love to have lots of natural light in our dream office. I'm an earth sign, I'm a Taurus. I want to see a nap room. I want like, you know, a dedicated nap cubby for myself. And yes, Alex, we want both space and policies. So both physical space and structures. You know, I want office dogs. I want equal pay. Right? I want like an in-house barista, you know, like I really want you all to kind of lean into this and just kind of design your own dream office. Like, what does this look like for you to, you know, really, I think, be safe, celebrated, comfortable, and like the place that you work, right? And like valued. And you do have an unlimited budget, so like dream big, right? So that's kind of the memo. I see some folks, it looks like, are already in the slides and should be able to access it. And so when you get sent off into your breakout rooms, just use the corresponding slide to your group. And if, folks are having trouble accessing it, just let us know. But as long as one person can access the slides in your group, you should be okay. But I'll pause here. Are there any questions about this activity before I kind of shepherd you off into your breakout spaces?
So we add our ideas to the actual PowerPoint that you just put in the chat.
Yes, correct.
And
So
work
for
down
example, there'll be
like
5
share.
breakout rooms. I have them built. And so if you're in room 1, you'll use slide 52 group 1, and you'll kind of use that as your kind of like whiteboard space to go to Google Images, copy paste, drop some stuff in there. You can write text, so if you want to say, we want our base salaries to be $100,000, whatever else, you can also do that. This is really kind of your group's creative medium to kind of show us, represent to us, whatever it is that you would like to see. Any other questions before I whisk you all away? Okay, sounds good. And you can always ask for help too. So if you're like running into tech issues or something in the space, feel free to let us know and one of us will kind of hop in there. But I will shepherd you all away. You have 15 minutes and endless amounts of money. So. All right, welcome back, folks. Hopefully this was fun, gave a little bit of different medium. Yeah, Gracie, if you want to share the screen again, we can maybe just go through like what folks in each group kind of put. Although I know group 1, it sounded like you all had some challenges. So group 1, what did you all kind of talk about?
We talked about what we would want, but then we remembered that we had to put policies or whatever you want to call it, and we wanted a month vacation and benefits and the usual benefits, and we wanted it on the beach and comfortable chairs. I'm trying to recall what we said because we were messing with the technology trying to figure it out. And so lots of sun. That's why when I finally remembered about the chat text link, then I quickly put in that picture. If you can see it, I don't know if you can. And anybody else remember, Kathy?
Yeah, lots of windows and bright lights.
Bright colors.
Great colors, yeah.
Somebody wanted a snack machine, good benefits, a month's vacation.
Yeah, we didn't get very far. I'm sorry.
No, do not apologize. But I will challenge you. Can you explain when you say good benefits? Like, what do you mean by good benefits?
Like
medical, dental, everything's paid for.
Salary.
Life insurance.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. Hopefully nobody is like dying at work, but yes.
People my age think of.
Someday we all do.
And I just wanted to comment, when we were doing all of this, I have a sister who works for Google, and I went to visit her office in New York City, and everything that we were putting down, they have. And those open spaces, lots of toys and places to sleep and things like that. And it was amazing. But my first thought is they provide all of these wonderful things for you to do. But on the other hand, they're really hoping that you spend a tremendous amount of time there in the office. It's not expected to be a 9 to 5. It is expected to be as many hours as you can put in. And that's why they have all these spaces for you to take breaks so that you can spend much more time there than you would with a typical 9 to 5. So I think it's interesting when we ask all these benefits, we have to think about what is it costing us too.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kathy. It sounds like the ideal workplace kind of for your group then maybe would be like the Google headquarters, but like with work-life boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? Like being able to, I think, set those boundaries and have that healthy relationship where you're not a worker, you are a person who also works, right? I think is really crucial. So thank you. Thank you, group one. We'll go to group two if you all want to kind of show us what you have. Lots of photos. So take it away.
Well, we talked about a lot of things that were sort of hard to represent in pictures, and everybody can chime in, but we wanted a good work-life balance. We wanted options to work from home when we want to, and at the actual office have nice outdoor space to enjoy, as well as the ability to have comfortable chairs, maybe I think it was a massage chair, and bring our pets or have an office dog, have a flexible schedule. We wanted to advocate for a 4-day work week, with increased vacation time. I'm going to say like 5 weeks, and have kindness in the workplace, and then have leadership that's like actually compassionate and listens to staff and collaborates on major decisions, and have like a positive team, people that we enjoy working with. That's those people high-fiving. Do you all want to add anything to that? There's a lot that we talked about.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I was just surprised because this is not exactly how it looks on my screen. So I'm glad to see that a lot of these things were added that we were talking about that I wasn't seeing represented on my screen. Just technology trying to catch up.
Well, and then one thing that I'll add is that I am an introvert and I generally like working from home and not going to an office. So this is also sort of my, well, if I have to go to an office, but I would actually prefer to stay home with my dog. So space for that also would be great.
Yeah, I love it. I would be so happy to work here. Right. I love the intentionality that you all put, I think, into a lot of these like non-tangible type, things. Because I feel like that's really important. You want to feel like you belong and are like valued as a person at work. It's like a very low bar, but yet, here we are. Let's go to group 3. What did you all have?
All right, so group 3, we talked a lot about, we've got the flexibility going with the lady doing yoga, not so much yoga, but just flexibility in the workplace. You guys can chime in too, Heather and Jean. Heather, the spa, the pool, like, you want to kind of elaborate on that?
Sure. Since we had an unlimited budget, I was thinking, I've heard of spas that have these like float pools, where like it completely eases all of the tension in your body, which I thought would be nice for our mental health. And I also added the punching bag, thinking more for clients. I work in a high school. So I often think like, boy, they just need to get out this energy and this frustration. So that was kind of how I represented the ability to, instead of trying to find hockey sticks somewhere or axe throwing, punching bag just for the people that are coming in that need to release some of that, those feelings.
And then we have the group in the middle with, it's like a good working team that they're having fun. Like they work well together. There's positivity and fun. Lots of laughter and fun. Money, obviously, really good to have good good pay. Who doesn't like a puppy at work? So I think that would be a good thing to have. Jean, do you want to jump in and add anything?
And the idea of being in the community, thank you for the help with the technology. I spent a lot of the time struggling. But like not in an office building, but actually based in a real place, working with whoever the people are that you are working with, which I guess says a lot about where I want to work in terms of an organization.
Yeah, I appreciate you all. I'm loving this like office float tank concept. If there was like a punching bag in my high school, I feel like that would have been so therapeutic. So, I love it. I would also love to work here. Let's go to group 4.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about what our ideas were here. We wanted to be able to work from home, but we also have some office vibe stuff. So I'm not sure if this office would be at home or in another place, but whatever, we just brainstormed it all. We wanted flexible desk options, being able to sit or stand at a desk. We wanted close proximity to nature, just being able to look out the window and see nature and walk outside and be in nature. We wanted a multicultural cafe right in the center of our workplace where we could just be with people and share ideas. And yeah, hammock for naps and relaxing. Having a gym in there to just get it out, move around. Some of the policy things that we talked about were fair pay, no harassment, having a flexible schedule, no dress code, and opportunities to relax and recharge. So that is our thing. And if anyone from the group wants to chime in on anything I missed.
That was great. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, you did great.
Yeah, I feel like I'm definitely noticing a theme coming up with folks. Really wanting to be near nature, really appreciating that like flexibility, and I think really just like this prioritizing of mental health, I feel like keeps coming up, right? Whether it's you can work at home or whatever it is, right? I think really honoring kind of people, the conditions that people work best in, right? Like letting them choose, letting them have that option. So let's go to our last group number 5.
So our group focused. No, you go, Luz, go for it.
No,
I was waiting for somebody.
You go. We really didn't have a designated person, so Rachel, you got it all.
So after, as everyone was talking, I realized that we definitely focused on like the more like physical workspace, the physical environment of our workspace. So we talked about like sleep pods, massages, pets at work, that cool chair. I didn't hear when that chair came in. So that's a cool chair. But being able to have a standing desk, cozy places, a place to meditate, connect to nature, and a personal chef. That was me. I love food. So that meant a lot to me because that would be really cool. And we also put a tranquil garden in there, but outdoor space, the ability to concentrate and not be disturbed a whole lot, quiet. That's kind of like what we're going for. Please add anything you guys would like to.
Nope, I think everything is perfectly fine. I want to say that I was actually in the process of finding a picture for teamwork, and I didn't have enough time, so I just wanted to add that in there.
That is important.
I love it. I feel like this is very like aesthetically pleasing and like very like health and wellness oriented. I would work at all of these places, right? I feel like they're all really solid and I don't know, they're very encouraging, right? I feel like they give a lot of power like back to staff, right? To really kind of advocate for the things that work for them. So thank you all for participating. I'm sorry that there were some tech issues. I think normally we try to do this on like Google Slides, so it's a little bit less tricky, but definitely I'm putting a mental note for kind of future trainings. Don't do PowerPoint again. And so why do you think we made you do this activity? Right? Like why do you think we pivoted, right? From talking about all of these assumptions and kind of the history and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Why do you think we made you do this activity? Why do you think we made you all kind of pivot?
Not sure.
I love it, Luz. No, I appreciate that. I do. I guess we'll start with, I guess, some of these questions on the slide, maybe to kind of get those brain juices going. So did you all feel safe or comfortable in these dream offices that you built? And what do you notice about kind of the things that you included? Leslie says in the chat, we see what we want to see. Heather says to show that we have many desires in common. Any other thoughts? Why do you think we made you do this?
We were talking about how the things that we were putting in our space, we wanted to be people and just be treated as people who have all kinds of different needs.
Jean says in the chat to be a person within a structure, right? To exactly, I think as Michelle's saying, right? We want to be seen and recognized and valued, right? That's like the core crux of it. Any other thoughts? Did you all feel safe and comfortable in your offices that you kind of built?
I think it allows us to express our individuality too, like just like what is important to us and what's going to make us feel comfortable in our space. So yeah, so I think like it would be ideal, obviously, to work in a place where you can have everything that you want and you know you're comfortable with, but it's not always the reality. Although I did get a stand-up desk recently, so we will say that.
I'm just really struck by what we all put in our images and some of the things that I'm actually going right now in our, like in my organizations, just some of the things that we're dealing with, like we're actually trying to make our offices more queer inclusive, and we're just bumping up a lot against a lot of things. There's an entire push to go back to the office, which is an open plan with a lot of like bright fluorescent lights. It's very noisy, it's very distracting. It's not necessarily, it's not a place where I feel calm and safe. So yeah, just like, what does it mean to be a person? And just have to deal with all these oppressive systems that created the typical office environment that we see. And Yeah, I think I've been really struck personally just by what COVID forced us to do, which was to work from home and you know what, it's not like the work stopped. It's not like we did anything. It's not, yeah, like things just kept moving. But you know what, I did a lot of that in my underwear. So, and no one, and like that's okay. So yeah, and just having I guess home is a place where I feel safe. So there's that. Some people don't feel safe at home, and maybe going to an office would be better. But yeah, just having like that relaxed thing where I can just be myself.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Rex. I feel like that's a huge part of it, right? Is are we able to bring our full selves to work, right? Or are we forced to like check some of our identities and experiences at the door? Or are we forced to, right, kind of fit into this mold? And so I will, oh, yep, go ahead, Rachel.
I was thinking about this actually in terms of like disability, like people with disabilities too, or neurodivergent, that they're just, you know, a typical office doesn't work for them, or like me specifically, like I use a lot of voiceover and like screen reading technology, and I need to always have headphones on. And if the office is too loud, I'm having a hard time focusing, and the light can be like a lot for my eyes. So like I totally agree that like working from home, it kind of allowed us to like all those like layers that we kind of put on to like protect who we naturally are. You could kind of take those off at home and just like work as you are, and it's beautiful. So that's it.
Yeah, no, right, the freedom to be able to participate fully and have truly accessible spaces for folks to exist and work and play and laugh is like really cornerstone, right? And kind of why I wanted you all to really lean into this activity with these like you're shooting for the ideal, right? You're shooting for, you know, where is it that you feel really valued, and like what do you want, right? And let's give you what you want and what you need. And before you go to the next slide, Gracie, I'm putting this out there. I was taking a bit of a leap of faith, I will admit, when I was developing this activity for you all. So I was like, oh no, what if someone like goes against what I was like planning here and then ruins this big surprise? Right, this grand reveal of like why I kind of wanted you all to do this. So if you can go to the next slide, Gracie, drum roll. I want you all to notice how nothing, anyone included in your dream workplace was gendered. I want you to look at how everything that you included was gender neutral, was inclusive, and was already like this beautiful, ideal, like exactly what you would want to see, right? I really wanted you all to kind of take away from this that you already kind of know that the like happy, healthy ideal is gender neutral and is like gender inclusive, right? You already know that. It's just a matter of teasing it out and kind of going back to step one, right? I know that we were all conditioned with all of these different things and we're constantly unlearning that. But like you already have that as a frame of reference. You're already working with that, right? And so when you're thinking about ways that you can make your workplace more inclusive, safer, you know, make it a brave space for folks to bring their full selves, you already kind of know what that looks like, right? It's just a matter of connecting, right? You know, those values to your actions, right? What are the different ways that you're going to kind of disrupt these ladders of inference that you're making that you already have kind of maybe within your workplace, and walking back down them and saying, you know, what is the right thing to do, right? How can I be the most respectful, or what are the structures that we can build up, right? That really, really recognize people. So I'll pause here. Hopefully this was like a great kind of me, you know, whipping off the tablecloth and saying, hello, everybody, look. But any thoughts, any ideas about kind of this activity? Was this useful? Was this helpful? Was this like a helpful light bulb moment? see in the chat box. Yes. And feel free to also tell me like this sucked. Like
no, I think it was very helpful. I think it's reinforcing that we have a voice, and if we are going back to workspaces, that we have this voice to express ourselves and ask for some of these things to be included in our workspace. And I also think COVID has forced management to have to look at this and say, if people are coming back, they want to feel safe, they want to feel included, they want to feel all of these things, and they have to look at what changes they can make to make staff want to come back. So I think this is an opportunity to really collectively move our voice forward.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that, Kathy, right? I really do urge all of you as co-conspirators, allies in solidarity, to use what power you do have and say, I'm not coming back unless you make this a more welcoming and safer space for my colleagues, right? I think it all just comes down to, right, like, how are you able to like show up as your full self? And we want everybody to be able to do that, right? And so with that, I think I'm going to I'll pause. Gracie, is there anything you would like to add, since I think you were so wonderful in asking me if I have anything to add? Anything to add, Gracie?
No, I mean, I think we kind of got you. It was like an aha moment, but I think, to Jasper's point, we kind of already know, like, yeah, it's dumb that we have gendered earplugs. It's dumb that we have gendered clothes. Like, yeah, it's dumb that we have gendered bathrooms. So like, how can we begin to like imagine policies, practices, ways of being, structures in our workplaces that don't need to rely on gender? Because again, like, it's hurting everyone, like even people who are most marginalized and most oppressed, and it's not serving anyone in the way that we think it is. So like, down with the binary, down with all these systems. Godspeed, friends, in creating these new things in your workplaces.
And I think with that, what I want to do is I want to move us into this like last breakout to kind of give you all the space to kind of chat again with each other. And what I'll do is I'll actually pull up the breakout rooms again. But what I really want you all to do is to kind of think through these kind of more action-oriented questions, right? So how can we move beyond kind of more superficial allyship into this deeper change work, right? How do you make sure your work isn't performative, right? Because it's one thing, I think, as we've been kind of saying from day one, to have like a gender neutral bathroom or to like memorize people's pronouns. But like, if you're not going deeper than that, are you really doing any sort of this like foundational work to really, really change things and to really kind of challenge your own ways you've been conditioned, right? So what I'll do is I'll recreate some of these breakout spaces. And I just want you all to kind of talk through these. Like, what are some of the things that you're going to kind of do moving forward? Then we'll kind of come back, we'll do a big group share back again, and then we'll kind of close out for the day. So any initial questions about this? Okay, I know y'all have been in breakout rooms a lot today. I promise this is the last one. I promise this is the last one. So let me open up these rooms for you all and we'll see you in a bit. All right, looks like folks are back. And yeah, I'm just curious if you all feel comfortable sharing, like, what did y'all talk about? What were some strategies? Like, what came up for you all? I mean, it looks like everybody kind of stayed in there until they got kicked out. So I'm assuming these were rich conversations.
Are we all back? Okay. Yeah, we talked about the spent a lot of time on the performative piece toward the end. feeling like for instance, my coworkers can sometimes assume that I'm not supportive of LGBTQ. And so me being aware of this, I will overperform and, try too hard. And that in turn makes it awkward for both of us with the client, the high school or middle school student who is LGBTQ. And so, it defeats the purpose of counseling and creating a safe space. So relaxing is important, and not overthinking how I'm coming across as supportive or not supportive.
And I'd say to build on that, we talked a lot too about how it's important to have these conversations, because if you talk about something, you normalize it. And one thing that I have appreciated about this training is the breakout rooms, because it's a little scary to go into a breakout room, but if there's only 2, 3, or 4 of you, it's very awkward not to talk. So you just end up having these great conversations. And so that's something that we can also do out in the real world as well, is have smaller group conversations and have a richer discussion that way.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Whatever from this training like sticks and resonates with you all, take it. Right? Like take it, run with it, like bring it back to your own workplaces, make them design their own dream office, like whatever it is. These tools are out there for you to use however makes sense. So I appreciate that. Any other groups? What did you all kind of talk about?
Yeah, I wrote
I
down
go ahead, Rex. Go ahead.
Yeah, in my group, we talked about talking, like talking to the people that we're interacting with, trying to not make those assumptions that like in the exercise, and making space for people to be themselves and opportunities to change things up. Like maybe their parents put one thing on a form, but once they get away from their parents and they're in a safer space, allow that opportunity for the person to say something different about how they want to be treated. Yeah, taking the time to get to know people, to affirm their humanity, making sure that forms and policies protect the people that actually need that protection, and offer ways to identify that isn't shoving people in a box. So more open answered questions on forms, like just a blank thing for gender or something like that. We talked about trying to create spaces, and with the idea that anybody that we run into might be queer and just closeted, and creating those safe spaces might allow them to eventually be themselves in that space, and have just trying to keep breaking down the history of how these systems got into place. Things like churches and Christianity are why we have a lot of this. We talked about language specifically in relation to that, like really gendered romance languages like Spanish and Portuguese and French and things like that. Like that's all over the world now, and assigning a gender to an object, like, break that down. Then, yeah, really, then we got into a conversation about consent and choice, and what choices do people get to make with their bodies, and when and why, and how a lot of times our culture is set up to take away consent and take away choice, when people are too young be able to advocate for themselves, like the things that happen to children. It's pretty bad, but it can be also hard as an adult to be able to have all the things you need to make the choices about how you want to be treated and have that affirmed. So it was really good. We just talked about a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Rex. I know someone else, Dora, maybe then came off mute. If you want to jump in, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we talked a lot about like the importance of communication and the importance of just being involved in training such as this. And that there is that like bit of almost like walking on eggshells, because you're afraid of like saying the wrong thing or insulting or like not using the right pronoun, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. But that there is a lot of value in just being patient and understanding that, on both ends, like, or you know what I mean? Like that people need to kind of meet each other in the middle, and understanding that if you make a mistake, as long as, it's obviously not maliciously, like the fact that we're all here speaks to the fact that we want to learn more about this topic, you know what I mean? And learn how to be better allies. So just the fact that like, what I was saying was, if you come from a space of being understanding, being open, being aware of that ladder of inference, that everybody has it, that it's going to create much more healthy environments for communication and conversation. And then I had a client, and so I had to leave. So if they want to jump in, and talk about what else was going on when I was gone, that would be great.
Well, now I'm on the spot. Thank you, Dora. That was very well said. And she really did cover everything, even though she skipped out for a client. But yeah, just trying to be more comfortable myself with how to approach, anything that comes up with our students, on this topic, and just how to create that safe space, like we said.
I will say, I think one thing that I really value, I think you all sharing as kind of this common theme is, right, like how to practice healthy conflict. Like, I feel like I've heard that come up in a couple different ways, like said in different, forms, but I do really want you all to kind of like lean into that, right? Because I think there's a huge difference between being uncomfortable and unsafe. And I think growth really comes from some of that discomfort, right? Of, trying to like flex these muscles, and like maybe you're going to get it wrong and you have to apologize. And I definitely don't want to like, right, discount that sometimes that can be harmful to people, right? Like, and it's how you kind of continue flexing that muscle afterwards and really trying to practice that, right? Because that's the huge piece about, and I think I've heard this phrase floating around, I think in a lot of other trainings and things, but allyship isn't something you can claim. It's something that has to be given to you, right? And so I think it's something that I encourage you all to really lean into. No problem, Heather. I love encouraging folks to lean into discomfort, because I feel like that is such a huge point of, and I think it's a societal value, right? Like, we're not encouraged to be uncomfortable, right? And I think there's a difference, once again, between discomfort and that being, a space of growth, and unsafe, right? There's a big line, right? But hopefully this training made you all feel uncomfortable or discomforted in certain ways that, promoted a little bit of that healthy conflict and friction within yourself to kind of do that kind of reflection. So any other thoughts, ideas, reflections folks want to share on this last piece before I kind of toss it back to Gracie?
Well, I think the fact that we're aware of it, and sometimes I think, oh, I did that wrong. But I think for the fact that I'm aware of it and I'm trying to put my best foot forward, with equity and everything, I think sometimes we're a little too hard on ourselves. I think if we are putting our best foot forward and trying to make a difference and trying to be more open and aware, I feel pretty good. And that's a piece I took away from this class.
Yeah, I encourage you all to think about what Gracie mentioned on that first day, right? Of moving towards like a more inclusive, equitable, gender neutral future is good for everybody, right? It's like, do it because, right? I mean, it is the right thing to do, but also keep in mind, like your dream offices, right? Nothing in there was gendered. Like those were all really safe, wonderful, healing, valued spaces. And you all also felt valued there as well, right? So I really encourage, you know, I think practicing that sort of grace, but also while you also take into account that accountability, right? So as you're holding yourself accountable to these really high equitable standards of how you treat people, how you refer to people, etc., you know, it's also for you, right? Right. I think debunking some of that, like us versus them, like the queers, it's like, no, we're here. Actually, we're running this training. Right. I think is really important. So I've been talking a lot. I'm happy to toss it back to you, Gracie, I think, for kind of some of this last closing piece as we free you all from the shackles of this 2-day training.
Thanks, Jasper. And thanks everyone for your really thoughtful, deep reflections. You know, I think something I try to remind myself of, and Jasper kind of really beautifully alluded to this, but, you know, we shouldn't ever try to like arrive at being like the best ally. Like I always need to practice allyship to, you know, my BIPOC colleagues, to my immigrant colleagues, to, you know, the different identities that I hold that have some power and some privilege. I'm not ever going to arrive at being like the perfect best ally. This is something I have to do for my whole life. And I think as long as we can sort of keep that in the back of our minds, always be open to learning, to being corrected, to being called in, lovingly called in, like as long as we're open and show ourselves some grace and some humility, you know, I think a lot of it will make sense to us and we won't feel the need to be defensive or feel deflated. So just wanted to add that. But I want to just move us into closing, and like we'll maybe just do like a quick, like, you know, I'll call on someone if you just want to share like one word or one takeaway from today's training, and then we'll share you our contact info, some additional resources, and then send you off into the abyss of the virtual world or the real world. So maybe Leslie, could we start with you? One word or one takeaway that you're taking from this 2-day training?
I was going to chat it in the chat box. I was just going to say awesome. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Michelle, let's go to you. One word or one takeaway from today's training?
Encouraged.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. Dora, I'll go to you next.
I would say empowered.
Awesome. Thanks, Dora. Heather, I'll go to you next.
Awareness.
Thanks, Heather. Susan.
Sorry about that. As a strategy, I want to be welcoming.
Awesome. Thanks, Susan. Kathy, how about you? One word or one takeaway from today's training?
Do not assume and find an appropriate way to ask questions.
Love that. Thanks, Kathy. Rex, I'll go to you next.
Reach for the dream.
Thanks, Rex. Amanda, I'll go to you next.
Striving for more direct action.
Awesome, thanks. Tanayo.
I should have been more prepared, but I feel like just maintaining humility and always keep on learning.
Love that. Thanks, Tanayo. Sheila, how about you?
Sorry, I have a dog in my way. I would say very informative, went really deeper than I thought it went. would be, but it's definitely informative on all aspects of what we were discussing.
Thanks, Sheila. Appreciate you. Cindy Lou, one word, one takeaway.
It was empowered, but now I want to say educated.
Awesome. Thanks, Cindy Lou. Sepia, how about you?
I will continue my learning and reflection. Thank you for this opportunity.
Rachel, I'll go to you next.
I think my takeaways were that progress isn't linear and gender neutral bathrooms are not enough.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. Jean, I'll go to you next.
Get down the ladder all the time.
Yeah, walk back down that ladder. I love that, Jean. Luz, I'll go to you next.
I think everyone said kind of like a little bit of what I was feeling. But if I had to say something, it's like, look at yourself all the time in the mirror. And if you think you know something, please challenge that.
Love that. Yeah, humble ourselves a little. I love that, Luz. Thank you. Erin, Small, one word, one takeaway from today's training.
It was educational for me.
Awesome. I'm so glad. Thank you. Lauren Bard, one word, one takeaway for you.
Growth.
Love that. Jasper, one word, one takeaway.
I'm just so grateful for you all as our participants. I feel like it's always really difficult for us as trainers offering these kinds of trainings where we have no idea who's going to come into the space. Like, people are starting from all different points along this journey. And I feel like you all really modeled well our community agreements, and I think trying to lean into a lot of things. And I appreciate the leaps of faith you went on with Gracie and I. So just wanted to echo my gratefulness to you all, and hopefully you all can now see why I specifically poached Gracie to run this with me.
I appreciate
What about you,
Jasper.
Gracie?
Oh, I appreciate you, Jasper. Yeah, I'm just really thankful. I think y'all were such a great group. 2 days, 6 hours is a long time, but like, you really showed up and like we're ready to dive in head first. And that's really all you want to hope for as a facilitator, because I feel like you made it easy. You made our jobs easy. So really appreciative and thankful to y'all for that. This is, some of the contact info for CHTI. So our website is hriainstitute.org. We're on Twitter. There's a LinkedIn group. The email for the Community Health Training Institute is also traininginstitute@hria.org. We'll send these slides out. This is the team's contact info again. I don't technically work on CHTI. I do work at HRIA, but there's Lauren's email, Tanayo's email, Jasper's email, and a few of our other wonderful managers and associates and managing directors' emails. And if anyone ever wants to get in touch with me, my email is there. I work on a few other projects within our training and capacity building department. Do a lot around substance use, overdose prevention, harm reduction. So if anyone's like into that, you can feel free to send me an email. And I think our last thing, we're probably just gonna drop a link in the chat to our feedback form, which Tanayo did already. Thank you, Tanayo. So we'll send the slides. We'll also send additional resources for folks like, around pronouns, around the alphabet soup, everything that the sort of history that Jasper went over in day one. We'll send a lot of links and a nice encyclopedia of resources for you all to kind of peruse when it feels right for you. But my last ask would just be to click that link to the feedback form. We really value your feedback and appreciate your feedback, ways that we can improve future trainings. Let us know what worked, what didn't work. But once you kind of have that open, I'll kind of let you go on your way. You get a whole 5 minutes back in your day. And thanks everybody. Hoping you have a wonderful rest of your day. Have a lovely long weekend, and hopefully we see you all in the virtual world sometime soon.